They tell you that change is slow, that revolutions announce themselves with warning lights. But some mornings, you wake up, and everything you thought was stable, predictable, maybe even safe, has already shifted beneath your feet. That's today. Because Bitcoin, that icon of rebellion, is no longer who it was. And neither are we, watching from the other side of the glass, hearts pounding in uncertain synchrony. Before we get lost down this rabbit hole, I want to ask you for something small that helps us both. Subscribe, right now, to Crypto 101 Central. Just a tap, a breath. If you want to make sense of the chaos and find your footing among the noise, hit that bell too. The world of crypto rarely whispers. It roars, and I want you to hear every note of its song. So let's stay connected. Let's survive this together. For so long, Bitcoin was like a vision seen from afar, a mirage that promised freedom. It did not move with the tides of Wall Street's ocean. It didn't tremble at the S&P 500's whims. It was wild, raw, and maybe even beautiful in its isolation. I remember those years, 2015 through 2019, as if they happened in another life, another body. Back then, Bitcoin was closer to nothing than anything else. It hovered, ghost-like, its numbers whispering near zero while oil, bonds, and gold followed their own gravity. It was pure, volatile, a tempest in digital form. Only the bold and the reckless danced with it, telling themselves, as I did, whispering at the edge of sleep. You are safe here because it is unlike anything else. Because it is untamable, uncorrelated, a wolf stalking the quiet snow while the herd tramples elsewhere. Portfolio theory, they call it. Bundle up enough independent spirits and somehow, you're less likely to freeze. I believed it, and maybe I needed to. There was poetry in its defiance. But then came the darkness, a shadow with a name we all know and some of us still feared to speak. The pandemic, 2020 split the sky open. When the old world broke, when markets crashed together in a thunder of panic, Bitcoin was swept up, thrown down like everything else. Investors, hungry for cash, sold what they could touch, digital or not, and suddenly the line that separated Bitcoin from Wall Street blurred, faded, then vanished. Correlation with the S&P 500 shot up overnight, climbing from near nothing to almost one-half. I felt it, maybe you did too, that ache of losing what we thought was eternal. Central banks poured oceans of liquidity into the cracks, markets turned euphoric. Bitcoin soared, echoing the fevered dream of the Nasdaq, its fate tied to risk and appetite. Between 2021 and 2022, the bond grew tighter, correlation reaching from just over one-half to nearly two-thirds. The rebel had been tamed, not by governments, not by old enemies, but by the suffocating embrace of mass adoption. Everything changed again when spot Bitcoin ETFs were approved in January 2024, a moment people like me had both craved and feared. For years, we wondered if the institutions would come. They did. They came carrying the weight of tradition, of portfolio models and mechanical trades. Bitcoin, once an island, became just another target in their machine. Now, when equities fall, Bitcoin falls too. The idealists, those spirits who saw Bitcoin as salvation, had to cede the field to mathematicians and hedge funds. Even the language changed. Words like beta, allocation, rebalancing, they echoed through Bitcoin's halls. The very thing that made it precious, its independence, faded like breath on a mirror. Where does that leave us now? Look at the numbers. Today, Bitcoin's correlation with the S&P 500 sits near one-half. Sometimes, in volatile storms, it surges even higher, almost 9/10. I used to tell people, if you believe Bitcoin will zig while stocks zag, maybe it's time to listen again. The dance is not as unpredictable as it seems. The patterns grow tighter every day. The revolution is always being domesticated, but not everywhere. Some connections remain brittle, even as the world changes its tune. Bonds, for example, those old pillars, still move apart from Bitcoin, their relationship as dull and distant as always. Track the numbers. Nearly zero. The same goes for oil. A 10-year study found nothing of substance. Short-term spikes burn and fade, leaving barely a scar. One might almost say it is meaningless noise, like static on a forgotten radio station. Then there's gold, a mirror that once reflected Bitcoin's story. For years, they moved together, sometimes tentatively, sometimes boldly. Digital gold, they called it, two assets intertwined by inflation anxiety and a shared allergic reaction to the dollar's weakness. But look closer at the recent past. The chart tells a story of rupture. Gold surged for safety while Bitcoin faltered, their paths diverging with the sudden cruelty of old friends on opposite sides of a war. For the first time in memory, the correlation went negative, strongly so. Today, they move in different directions, their old romance a memory, impossible to revive. After the February conflict with Iran, another twist, the lines cross, but the distance between them grows. It's almost poetic. The negative correlation persists, a reminder that in this market, nothing is forever. So what lesson survives all this turbulence? Maybe this: Bitcoin has grown up, but growing up comes at a cost. Mass adoption was never just a slogan, it was an invitation for the world to pull Bitcoin into its system of rules and cycles, of fear and greed. The institutions we longed for, they do not love with the intensity of the true believers. They trade, mechanically, indifferently. Bitcoin is now just another switch in their circuit, another line on their chart. For those of us who once saw Bitcoin as a lifeline, as a kind of myth set loose in the monetary wilderness, this is heartbreaking. It is also necessary. Change is the price of survival. Today, Bitcoin moves with the tides, less defiant, more dependent. Less useful as a shelter from the storm. Whether you celebrate or mourn depends on what you saw in it to begin with. For me, the loss is real, but so is the understanding that no revolution stays unbroken forever. I still believe. That is the contradiction I carry, the one I want you to hear in my voice. There are diehards, unmovable, unshakable, who will never sell, never surrender their Bitcoin. Maybe you are one of them, holding on from the earliest days, watching the world shift. But deep down, even they feel it. Last year, old hands let go, not just for profit, but because the thing they believed in had already become something else, something less wild, less holy. What is left is both hope and resignation. Bitcoin is still volatile, still unruly enough to tempt those who chase the thrill. Yet it is also part of the system, hungry for new capital, eager to outperform but destined to do so hand in hand with the risk-on world. If you want to navigate what lies ahead, you have to learn the rhythms of macroeconomics, the way the risk flows and ebbs, because that is the ocean Bitcoin now sails on. The world beyond Bitcoin is evolving too. The stock market is falling, tripping over its own feet. The S&P 500 took an 8% dive yesterday, another chapter in a long, blood-red saga. Thursday, of all days, stands as a warning. 9 consecutive Thursdays in the red, a record only matched in '98, when the old century breathed its last. It is as if the market remembers, on this one day each week, how fragile everything is. You can map the pain across 10 years. Thursday is the worst day, again and again. But in the spiraling chaos, there is also a twisted promise. Peter Mallouk of Creative Planning reminds us, over time, the market always rises higher, tilting upward regardless of the color of the day, or the party in the White House. Why? Because the debt, our silent inheritance, only knows one direction. Up. $40 trillion. That is where we are headed. Locked in a march of politicians, red and blue, each signing their names to a future they will not inhabit, a bill sent to hands not yet born. And as the debt climbs, as the dollar's value slides, the market's path can only turn one way. Think on it, each administration, with its slogans, its promises. Drill, baby, drill. It fit one era. Print, baby, print. That's the truth now. No matter who claims the address on Pennsylvania Avenue, the presses never stop, ink flowing, numbers soaring, the future borrowed in all but name. So here we are, together at the end of this episode, staring into the churning waters. If you feel the confusion, if you feel the hope and the worry fighting for space in your chest, you're not alone. Like this video if you hear something of your own story in mine. Leave a comment, tell me where you stand on this journey, on Bitcoin, the market, or the path ahead. I want to know, truly. And do not forget, if you want to understand how this digital revolution keeps evolving, subscribe now and hit the bell. Watch the other videos. Let's move through the storm together, with eyes wide open and spirit unbroken.